I stood there on the porch, holding the casserole dish I had made from Grandma June's recipe, her favorite. The house was lit up, laughter spilling out through the windows, and I could even see my sister Megan dancing near the dining room table. They were all there. Everyone. Except me. I had driven 3 hours, just like I did every year. Only this time, no one had told me the family was gathering a day early. I rang the doorbell. Through the frosted glass, I saw my cousin Brandon glance at me, and then look away. Finally, the door opened. "Olivia, what are you doing here?" Aunt Linda's voice wasn't surprised. It was annoyed, like I was the one making things awkward. I swallowed hard and forced a smile. "I thought the family dinner was today."
Oh,
"We changed it. Megan wanted everyone here before her flight tomorrow." "Didn't anyone tell you?" No one had. And that's when it hit me. I wasn't family to them anymore.
I was an outsider.
A stranger. Have you ever felt like you were the last to know because they never really wanted you there in the first place? I wasn't always the outsider.
In fact, there was a time I was the heart of this family.
Growing up in Vermont, the winters were known for two things: loud family dinners and even louder family debates. And somehow I loved both. The shouting over who got the last slice of pumpkin pie, or the endless debates about Yankees versus Red Sox. Those weren't fights to me. They were music. They were proof that I belonged. I was the middle child of three. My older brother, Josh, was the golden boy, star athlete, straight-A student, my parents' pride. My younger sister Megan was the baby, always a bit of a drama queen but irresistibly charming. And then there was me, Olivia. Quiet, observant, the helper. I wasn't loud, but I noticed everything. I remembered birthdays, brought tissues when someone cried, refilled empty glasses before anyone asked. When I was 8, I made a scrapbook of Grandma June's favorite recipes and gave it to her for her birthday.
She cried.
Not because of the gift, but because she said, "You see me, even when no one else does." That became a thing with me. I saw people. I remembered things no one else did. I showed up. Every time. When I was 15, my mom got pneumonia. I was the one who brought her tea at night, snuck a space heater into her room, and kept a journal of her medications. I didn't think of it as special. That's just what you do when you love someone. But looking back, it set the tone. Because Josh and Megan were praised for their accomplishments, while I was expected to carry the emotional weight. Unseen. Unpraised. Taken for granted. Still, I didn't mind. Not then. Because there were moments that made it worth it. Like Christmas Eve at Grandma June's, when the whole family would sit in a circle and pass around an ornament box, each of us picking one to hang on the tree. Every year, Grandma gave me the same porcelain angel to hang because she said, "You're the only one who still believes in this magic." Or summers in Maine, when we'd all pile into my uncle's cabin. I remember falling asleep to the sound of Megan giggling about her crush, or Josh sneaking out to meet his friends, while I stayed up organizing everyone's sunscreen and beach towels for the next day. I was the glue. I held everyone together. I didn't realize that glue is invisible until it starts to crack. It wasn't until college that I noticed the imbalance start to hurt. Josh got into Columbia. Megan got into NYU. I went to a state school an hour from home, so I could take care of Mom during her second surgery. No one said thank you. They just said, "You've always been the responsible one." Josh would fly in once a year. Megan came home when she needed money. I was there every weekend, making meals, organizing bills, keeping the family engine running. At 24, I got engaged to Tyler. He wasn't flashy, but he was kind. He listened. He laughed at my dry jokes. He came from a big, messy, beautiful family, and for the first time, I felt what it was like to be wanted, not just needed. I introduced him to my family at Thanksgiving. He brought flowers for Mom, bourbon for Dad, and fixed Grandma June's clogged sink before dessert. And yet, the only thing my parents said later was, "He seems quiet." As if that was a flaw. Megan brought home a guy who crashed his car into our mailbox, and they loved him because he was charming. He wore expensive cologne and called Mom beautiful with that cheesy smile. They were dazzled. I remember thinking, why do they always love the noise and ignore the study? But I didn't say anything. I never did. When Tyler and I got married, it was a small wedding in the Catskills, intimate, sweet, filled with people who actually knew us. My side of the guest list was small. Josh didn't come because of work, and Megan came late, wearing a white dress. A literal white dress. Tyler's mom had to lend her a shawl to cover it up. Megan laughed it off. Relax, Liv. No one's looking at me. They were. Everyone was. She made sure of it. I remember catching Tyler's hand under the table and squeezing it. I'm okay, I whispered. But I wasn't. Still, I smiled in every photo. I gave a toast thanking everyone. I hugged Megan and told her she looked beautiful, even though my dress was barely zipped up and stained with wine thanks to her accidental spill. That's how it was. I kept the peace. I smoothed things over. And then Grandma June passed away. That was the beginning of the shift. We gathered at her house after the funeral. Everyone was there, wearing black, talking softly. But the warmth that once filled that house was gone. And not just because she was. In her will, Grandma left me her journals, her recipes, and her old locket, the one she used to wear every Sunday. Josh got her car. Megan got her pearls. But it was the locket that mattered. Inside, there was a note, handwritten. To my Olivia. You were the only one who saw me. Never forget your light. I held that locket in my hand like it was her heartbeat. Later that night, I overheard Megan talking to Aunt Linda. She gave Liv the locket?
Ugh. I thought I'd get that.
Grandma always said I reminded her of herself. And Aunt Linda laughed. I felt my face go hot. Not because of the jealousy, but because in that moment I realized they didn't see me. Not really. To them, I was just there. Available. Predictable. Convenient. When Megan bought her condo, she didn't invite me to the housewarming. She told me she forgot. When Josh had his first child, he sent a group email announcing it. No personal call, no photo, no Aunt Liv moment. Bit by bit, I started fading from their stories. Their events. Their lives. And I kept blaming myself. Maybe I hadn't tried hard enough. Maybe I didn't call enough. Maybe I was being too sensitive. But deep down, I knew. I had always been the safe one. The one they could forget because I never made them uncomfortable. Until one day, I started asking myself the scariest question of all. What if they never really loved me the way I loved them? The first time I realized something had truly shifted was on Megan's 30th birthday. She was always the spotlight girl. Glitter, champagne, perfect nails, too many selfies. So, of course, the family went all out. A private party at a rooftop bar in Boston, everyone dressed like they were attending the Met Gala. I wasn't invited. Well, technically, I was. 3 days after the party, I got a text from my cousin Brandon that said, "Hey, missed you at Meg's bash. That cake was insane, lol." I stared at the message for a full minute before typing back. Wait, what bash? No reply. Just silence. Later, I saw the pictures on Instagram. Megan, Josh, my parents, the entire extended crew, even the second cousins from New Hampshire, smiling in sequin dresses and tuxes under golden lights. There was no way they forgot to invite me. No way. I called Mom. She answered like nothing was wrong.
Hi, sweetheart.
Everything okay? Yeah, just wondering why I wasn't at Megan's party. There was a pause. Then, in the fakest surprised tone I've ever heard, "Oh, didn't Megan send you the invite?" I assumed she did. She didn't. Well, it was all very last minute. You're so busy these days. I figured it was for the best. I wasn't busy. And even if I were, I would have dropped everything for Megan's birthday. I always had. I baked her cake every single year for the last 10 years. I even surprised her once with a custom playlist of her childhood favorites. She knew that. They all did. That night, I sat at the edge of my bed, still dressed in my work clothes, scrolling through the photos over and over. The caption said things like, "Family means everything. Grateful for these people." I wasn't even tagged. Not one. I didn't cry. I just shut down. The next time I saw Megan, it was at a family brunch. She gave me a hug like nothing happened and said, "Oh my God, you would have loved the rooftop place." I totally meant to invite you, but it filled up so fast. You know how venues are. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, I would have come even if I had to stand. She smiled. You're sweet, but you know you hate crowds.
No.
I hated being excluded. But I didn't say that. I just laughed softly and stirred my coffee. That became the pattern. Excuses. Smiles. Lies dressed as misunderstandings. On Thanksgiving, I offered to host. I had just renovated my kitchen, and Tyler and I had this vision of a big, cozy dinner with both families. Mom hesitated. Well, I think Megan's already planning something. Why don't you two just come to her place? So we did. She forgot to put out place cards for us. Everyone else had theirs. Oh shoot, she said. I didn't even think about that. The table was arranged so that Tyler and I were at the very end, next to the hallway. There wasn't even enough silverware, so Tyler had to borrow a spoon from the kitchen. Halfway through dinner, Megan clinked her glass and stood. I just want to toast to family, the ones who show up, the ones who lift each other up, and especially those who always make things unforgettable. Everyone cheered, and I sat there thinking, she's toasting herself. And you're invisible in your own family. Even Tyler noticed. On the drive home, he reached over and took my hand. I don't think they see you live. Not the way I do. I stayed silent for a long time before whispering. I'm starting to think they never did. The deeper I looked, the more it became obvious. When Uncle Rick had his surgery, no one told me. I found out from a neighbor. When Megan's dog died, the family group chat exploded with photos and tributes. I messaged a sweet condolence. No one replied. At one point, I sent a photo of my garden in bloom. Something I'd been working on for months. Not a single reaction. Then came Megan's engagement. She posted the announcement on Instagram before telling me. The caption read, "To the sisterhood that raised me, thank you." I said yes. And there, in the photo, were her 5 bridesmaids. No, not me. I stared at the screen for what felt like hours. Scrolling, zooming, rereading, waiting for it to change. For some edit, a comment, a correction. Nothing. I finally messaged her. Wow. Congratulations. Wasn't expecting that. Beautiful photo. She replied with a single heart emoji. A week later, I asked her directly, Am I not part of your bridal party? Oh, Liv, it's not personal, she said, eyes wide with fake innocence. You're just more of the quiet type, you know? These girls, they're the party crowd. Don't take it the wrong way. But I did. Because even if I was the quiet type, I had been there for her through every heartbreak, every drunken cry at 2 a.m., every broken heel and stupid boyfriend. I had held her hair when she puked after prom. I had given up spring break senior year to help her pack for college. I had skipped Tyler's birthday once to help her prep for a job interview. But I wasn't bridal party material. I wasn't anything, apparently. I tried to explain all this to Mom one night. We were having coffee after Sunday dinner. Everyone else had gone to bed. I said, I feel like I'm disappearing from this family. She sighed, stirring her tea. Olivia, you overthink everything. You've always been sensitive. No, I said. I've always been observant. And I see what's happening. She looked at me with that tired, dismissive face. Why do you always make things about you? And that was it. That line. That one sentence. I realized I'd been hearing versions of it my whole life. Why are you so quiet? Why do you take things so personally? Why can't you just go with the flow? They didn't want me to speak. They wanted me to serve, to exist in the background, to be a placeholder in photos, a name on a card, a seat filled at the table. I was expected to be grateful for crumbs while they feasted in front of me. And yet I stayed, hoping, waiting, wishing someone would say, We see you. We love you. We need you here. That sentence never came. Instead came the doorbell moment. That casserole dish. That frosted glass. That sentence. Didn't anyone tell you? That wasn't the beginning of the end. It was just the confirmation I had been waiting for all along. I wish I could say there was one exact moment when I knew they had turned on me, but the truth is, it came like a slow burn, igniting from a flicker and growing into a full-on blaze. It was late September when it all came to a head. The family reunion was being held at Aunt Carol's lake house in Vermont, a tradition that used to mean something to me. Growing up, those reunions were the highlight of my summer. Carol's rustic home on the water always smelled like cinnamon and pine, and the fireplace would crackle like it was happy to see us. But this time, it felt wrong. Too quiet. Too polite. I arrived a little later than usual. Work had run over and traffic was a nightmare. I parked my car and grabbed the pie I had baked from the back seat, still warm in its foil tray. As I walked up the cobblestone path, I spotted my cousin Heather on the porch, sipping wine with 3 others. No one waved. Not even Heather. I smiled anyway and called out, "Hey, y'all." A few heads turned. One offered a half-smile. Heather barely blinked. I swallowed my unease and walked inside. The living room was full, too full. People were talking in hushed clusters, and the volume dropped the second I entered. Aunt Carol greeted me, but her hug was stiff, her hands barely resting on my back. "You made it," she said, already turning away. That's when I saw it. My name wasn't on the family welcome board. It used to be a tradition. Every year, Aunt Carol wrote everyone's name on a big white poster board shaped like a tree, each person a leaf. Little details underneath. Birthdays, fun facts, inside jokes. It was quirky and warm. I used to help her make it. But this time, there were leaves for everyone else. Not me. Not even a space. I told myself it must have been a mistake. A forgetful moment. So I casually asked her, trying not to sound hurt. "Oh, you're not technically on this year's list," she said flatly. There was some discussion. Discussion. I repeated. "Well, you've missed a few gatherings. People felt like maybe you weren't as involved anymore." I blinked. I didn't come last year because I had the flu. The year before that I was caring for Dad when he was in the hospital. "I know," she said. "But still, you've changed, sweetheart." The way she said changed, like it was a sin. Then Heather chimed in from behind me. "Honestly, Emma, you've gotten a little distant. We don't really know who you are anymore." That word again. Stranger. I felt the weight of it. It wasn't just the missing name on the board. That night, at dinner, I was placed at the end of the table with the kids. Literal children. My 10-year-old niece sat beside me, asking if I liked unicorns. My plate came out last and cold. I tried to laugh it off. Tried to be gracious. But then the topic of family projects came up, something everyone used to contribute to. This year, they'd pooled money to buy Aunt Carol a new dock for her boat. Everyone was listed on the thank you card. Everyone except me. "Wait, I didn't know about this," I said. "Oh," Aunt Carol replied. "Well, we sent the email chain. Maybe you weren't checking?" I check my email every day. We use the family thread. Maybe your address got removed somehow. Somehow. I stared at her. "Did you remove it?" She didn't answer. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat outside on the dock by the water, watching the reflection of the moon shimmer. I wanted to cry, but I was too numb. I felt like a ghost, someone who used to matter but had faded from memory. The next morning, things got worse. I overheard a conversation I was never meant to hear. I had gone into the pantry to get a spoonful of peanut butter, childhood habit, and was about to step out when I heard Heather's voice in the kitchen. "I'm just saying, Emma always made everything about her. She's so dramatic. Ever since her dad died, it's like she wants attention all the time." "I know," Aunt Carol agreed. "And that whole thing about getting passed over for that promotion, wasn't she supposed to be this big career woman? What's she doing now again?" "Freelance something or other," Heather laughed. "Oh," Carol said, "so unemployed." Laughter. It pierced me like a knife. These were my people. My family. I backed away quietly and slipped out through the back door, heart pounding. I walked until I couldn't hear them anymore. Until the laughter stopped echoing. When I returned hours later, no one had noticed I'd been gone. That night, I packed my things. I left the untouched pie in the fridge, a silent reminder of the warmth I had brought, unwanted and unnoticed. I didn't say goodbye. But betrayal wasn't done with me yet. 3 days later, I got a call from my cousin Jeremy. "Hey, just a heads up," he said cautiously. "Your name came up in the family Zoom." Zoom. Yeah. Everyone was talking about the Christmas rotation. You know, who's hosting this year. I wasn't even aware there was a rotation. And someone brought up whether you should be included at all. I froze. "What do you mean?" He hesitated. "Carol said you've become unstable. That you stormed out of the reunion. Heather added that you've been emotionally manipulative. That you cried to guilt people." I nearly dropped the phone. "Jeremy," I whispered. "You know me. You know me." "I do," he said. "That's why I'm calling. But I'm just warning you. They're rewriting things. Twisting it. Trying to make you the black sheep." My chest tightened. This wasn't just exclusion. This was erasure. They were actively dismantling who I was to them, replacing me with a version they could justify pushing away. I stared out the window of my apartment that night, listening to the city traffic below, and I knew something had broken. Not just in the family, but in me. And yet, in that void, something else stirred. Not sorrow. Not fear. Resolve. If they wanted a stranger, I would become one. But not the kind they could ignore. The kind they would remember. I remember the exact moment something inside me snapped, but not in a chaotic, angry way. It was quieter than that, like the hush before a storm. That's when I realized I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table where I was only ever meant to serve drinks. I stopped crying over the family I'd lost. I stopped replaying that night at the birthday dinner. The conversations, the cold glances, the deliberate snubs, they had all played their part. I was done grieving what never really was. And I was done being quiet. I started with my job. I had always been the nice girl at the office. You know, the one who said yes to everything. Covering for colleagues, accepting last-minute projects, skipping lunch. But when you've been rejected by your own blood, there's not much left to fear anymore. Not even office politics. So when management opened up applications for the internal leadership program, I applied. I didn't ask if I was ready. I didn't wait for approval. I polished my resume, walked into that interview with my shoulders back, and spoke like I belonged in that room. Because I did. 3 weeks later, I got the email, "Congratulations, Nicole. Welcome to the Future Leaders Program." My heart pounded. Not just because of the opportunity, but because it meant I was finally steering my life instead of reacting to it. I signed up for therapy again, but this time, not to fix what was wrong with me. This time, I wanted to understand my patterns, why I had tolerated emotional scraps for so long, why I felt guilty for outgrowing people, and most importantly, how to trust my instincts again. And it helped. I started seeing my family dynamics more clearly. How Aunt Diane had always acted threatened when I showed any independence. How my cousins copied me but mocked me behind my back. How my silence had made me easy to control. But the real shift happened with my living situation. I had been renting a small apartment on the outskirts of town. It was safe and affordable but uninspiring. One afternoon, I passed by a newly renovated Victorian house with a "For Sale by Owner" sign in the window. Something about it pulled me in. Maybe it was the wraparound porch or the giant oak tree in the front yard. I called the number. I toured the property. And despite my stomach doing cartwheels, I made an offer. That house represented more than just real estate. It was mine. Fully mine. Not tied to a family name, not a hand-me-down. I furnished it with secondhand finds, thrifted art, and hand-sewn curtains. Every corner of that house whispered, "You belong here." Then came the part one never saw coming. One day, while grocery shopping, I bumped into Chelsea. Of all people. She looked startled, almost embarrassed to see me. "Nicole," she said, eyes scanning me up and down.
Wow.
"I almost didn't recognize you." I didn't smile. I didn't shrink. "Hey, Chelsea," I replied, my voice cool but steady. There was an awkward pause. She shifted her weight from one heel to the other, clutching a carton of almond milk like it might save her. "I heard you bought a house?" "That's cool," she said, as if the words tasted sour. "Yeah," I nodded. "I did. Just a little place, but it feels like home. She laughed nervously. Well, that's great. I guess everyone's moving on, huh? I nodded again.
Yep.
Some of us more than others. Her smile faded. And then she said something that honestly shocked me. Diane's not doing so great, by the way. She had some kind of falling out with her daughter. Family stuff is messy, huh? I raised an eyebrow.
Messy? No.
It's only messy when people keep sweeping things under the rug. That was the end of the conversation. I walked away with my head high, and for the first time, not even an ounce of guilt. But the true turning point? It came in the form of a letter. An invitation, actually. A family reunion. Addressed to me. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But there it was, in Aunt Diane's handwriting, complete with RSVP instructions and a note that said, "It would be nice to see you again." I placed the letter on my dining table and stared at it for a long time. My old self would have read into it, hoped it meant they were sorry, and maybe even started preparing a dessert to bring. But this Nicole? She wasn't interested in crumbs of reconciliation. She wanted truth. And boundaries. So, I did something symbolic. I took the letter, folded it neatly, and placed it inside a book titled Set Boundaries, Find Peace. And I left it there. Because forgiveness doesn't always mean reunion. Sometimes it means letting go of who you thought people were and finally becoming who you were always meant to be. Then I turned my focus outward. There were other people in the world, people who weren't related by blood but connected by something deeper, shared values, mutual respect, emotional safety. I joined a local women's entrepreneurship group. I volunteered at a community center teaching young girls leadership skills. I reconnected with an old college friend, Layla, who had once told me I was too bright to stay dimmed by other people's shadows. One night, Layla and I sat on my porch with tea, watching the sun set behind the oak tree. She turned to me and said, "You're different now. It's like you walked through fire and turned into steel." I smiled. Or maybe I just stopped believing I had to earn love that should have been given freely. That's when I knew, truly knew, I wasn't that stranger anymore. I was home, in my own skin, in my own power, and I was only just getting started. The thing about people who underestimate you is, they never expect you to rise. But I wasn't just going to rise. I was going to soar and do it right in front of their faces. After I made the move to California, I channeled every ounce of my pain into something productive. I enrolled in an online entrepreneurship accelerator that specialized in minority and women-led startups. I took weekend classes, applied for grants, and taught myself digital marketing at night after waitressing all day. Within 9 months, I launched my first business, a mobile wellness and therapy service aimed at underserved women in high-stress jobs. It started small, just me and 2 part-time counselors. But I knew exactly who I wanted to help because I had been them. To my shock, a local lifestyle blogger booked a session and posted a glowing review. Then a startup magazine picked up the story. Small-town girl builds safe space for working women in LA. Suddenly, investors started calling. Within a year, I had 6 therapists, a contract with a major hospital for overflow referrals, and even a podcast sponsorship deal. But it wasn't just success I wanted. It was truth. And I wasn't going to feel fully healed until I forced them, my own family, to see who I had become. I waited until the timing was just right. It came sooner than expected. One Sunday morning, I received a group text from my cousin Katie. It said, "Hey fam. Big news, Grandma's 85th birthday party is back on. Everyone's invited. Hope you can make it. We'll all be at Aunt Cheryl's. Bring food. And yes, there will be karaoke grinning face with sweat microphone." I stared at the screen, my heart thudding. Of course, I hadn't heard a peep from any of them in almost 2 years. Not since they forced me out of the house, out of the will, and out of the family WhatsApp group. And now they expected me to show up just like that? That's when I had the idea. It wasn't about revenge. It was about awakening. I would go. But not as the sad, broken version of me they discarded. I would go as the woman I had become. First, I rented a designer outfit. Tasteful, not flashy. I hired a professional stylist to do my hair in a sleek bun and got my makeup done just enough to say, I'm doing better than ever, but I didn't come here to beg. But the cherry on top? I pulled up to the party in my newly leased Tesla, stepped out with my business partner, the lovely, sharp-tongued Aria, who also happened to be a former investment banker with zero patience for small-minded gossip. As soon as we entered, I felt the atmosphere shift. Heads turned. Silence dropped. Aunt Cheryl was the first to fake a smile. Oh wow, look who finally decided to come back. I smiled, cool and polite.
Yes.
And it's so nice to see everyone still stuck in the same furniture arrangement from 2004. A few nervous chuckles followed, but the message landed. I wasn't the same girl who got pushed out in slippers and shame. I was in control now. I walked around, calmly greeting the very people who once watched me cry on the porch without blinking. Some tried to apologize subtly with half smiles and limp hugs. Others avoided eye contact altogether. Then came the moment of poetic justice. They brought out the karaoke machine and someone yelled, "Get Amy to sing. She used to be the best." I almost said no, but Aria nudged me, whispering, "This is your mic drop." So I walked up,
Took the mic.
and sang Titanium by Sia. Every line hit like a thunderclap. You shoot me down, but I won't fall. I am titanium. By the end, half the room was clapping. The other half just stared, unsure what to do with the version of me they no longer recognized or controlled. Before leaving, I stood by the front door, thanked my grandmother warmly, and turned to the rest. Thank you all for teaching me exactly who not to become. I'm doing just fine now, and I hope someday you will be too. We left as jaws dropped, and Aria whispered, "Now that's how you shut down a legacy of toxicity." Justice wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it came dressed in poise, driving a Tesla, and singing Sia in a living room filled with people who used to look down on you. And honestly, that was better than any revenge I could have planned. The courtroom was quiet except for the judge's gavel striking down, finalizing the settlement. My family, once so tightly knit in photo albums and fake holiday dinners, now sat fractured across the room, not even glancing at each other. The tension wasn't just legal, it was emotional, spiritual, generational. Something had shattered, and not even justice could piece it back the same way. I stepped outside the courthouse, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel like a stranger. I stood tall in the sun-drenched parking lot, the cool autumn breeze running through my hair, and felt something stir inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not revenge, not smugness, just peace. And freedom. The journey had drained me.
I won't lie about that.
Fighting back comes at a cost, even when you're right. Emotionally, spiritually, physically, I was exhausted. I remember sitting in my car that day, gripping the steering wheel, and just breathing. Deep, shaky breaths. Crying, not out of sadness, but because the war was over. Because I had stood up, finally, for the little girl inside me who had been trained to stay quiet. I thought about my mother, about her silence, about the betrayal that ran under the surface of every "How are you, sweetie?" she had ever whispered to me while handing me food I paid for. I had gone back through years of photos and moments, realizing how many times she had seen me suffer and stayed silent. How often she had chosen her comfort over my protection. That truth hurt more than the forged will. More than the lies. Because it meant I had never really been chosen. But that's the power of reflection. It turns wounds into windows. And in those windows, I saw myself. Not the girl they belittled at family dinners. Not the woman they tried to erase from the will. Not the black sheep they whispered about behind closed doors.
I saw me.
A woman who rebuilt herself with bruised hands and a broken heart. A woman who was still standing. Still loving, still whole, even after everything. And something incredible started to shift inside me after that. I stopped asking why me, and started asking, what now? I went no contact with most of them. Not out of hatred, but out of necessity. Boundaries became a sacred ritual for me. I stopped explaining myself to people who never cared to understand me. I stopped showing up to be tolerated. If you couldn't celebrate me, You couldn't have me. But here's the strangest part. I forgave them. Not because they asked. Not because they deserved it. But because I refused to carry their poison into my future. I forgave them so I could be free. So I could make space in my soul for joy again. The settlement money helped me restart. I moved across the country to Oregon, to a small coastal town where the air smells like salt and possibility. I opened a small art studio, something I always wanted but was told would never be practical.
Now,
I make art for people who feel too much and say too little.
people like me.
Sometimes women visit my studio, strangers at first, and tell me their stories of betrayal, of being cut out, of being labeled the outsider. And I see the same flicker in their eyes I once saw in mine, pain disguised as politeness. And I get to say, with full honesty, I know how that feels. But you're not alone anymore. Because that's the funny thing about healing. Once you do it, you become a mirror for others to find themselves too. I'm not the same woman who once stood awkwardly at the edge of her own family photo. I'm the woman who learned that sometimes losing everything is how you find yourself. They made me feel like a stranger in my own bloodline. So, I became the woman who no longer needed their map to navigate her worth. They'll never forget the lesson I gave them, not because it was loud or cruel, but because it was final. I walked away, and I never looked back. People often ask me how I managed to survive everything they put me through, the lies, the gaslighting, the years of emotional exile in my own home. And my answer is always the same. The moment you stop seeking love from people who profit off your pain, you start remembering who you really are. For years, I was the outsider in my own family, a stranger at my parents' table, a ghost at the weddings, holidays, birthdays. They had written me out of their story, while pretending they hadn't. But in truth, I became someone they could never understand because I chose not to shrink just to stay included. They made me feel like I didn't belong. So I built a life where they no longer had access. They made me feel powerless. So I became the one thing they could never control. Unapologetically free. If you've ever felt like the black sheep, if you've ever walked into a room full of family and felt more alone than when you're actually alone, then let me tell you this. You don't have to earn your way back into spaces that were designed to exile you. Forgive them, not because they asked for it, not because they earned it, but because you deserve to stop carrying what they handed you. You deserve softness,
Peace.
and a life that's not dictated by the ghosts of other people's projections. I didn't set out to go viral. But when I shared a piece of my journey on a podcast one day, a small clip about what it feels like to be disowned for choosing authenticity over obedience, something strange happened. It exploded. Women across the country commented, DM'd me, emailed me. Some said, I thought I was the only one. Others said, you just put words to my entire childhood. And that's when I realized I wasn't just healing from what they did to me. I was becoming a mirror for others who didn't even know they needed one. The lesson? Just because they don't clap doesn't mean you're not worthy of applause. Just because they don't call doesn't mean you're not unforgettable. And just because they try to erase you doesn't mean you don't exist in bold, permanent ink. I don't need their approval anymore. And the irony? Now they sit and watch from the sidelines, while the girl they once called difficult becomes the one name everyone remembers. Life didn't return to normal after everything that happened. It became something better. Something I had never thought possible before. I didn't move back to the town where all that trauma had unfolded.
I didn't want to.
I had built something new, something sacred, something completely mine. And I was finally free. There were moments, quiet ones, like when I'd sip coffee in the morning by my new window, or walk barefoot across my garden, or sit silently watching the sun set, when I would remember, not with pain but with distance, like an old wound that no longer hurts, just itches when it rains. I did hear from them again. It was about a year after the lawsuit was finalized and the house was legally mine. I received a letter from Aunt Vicky. She wrote that she didn't expect me to forgive them, and she understood if I never wanted contact again. She said she missed my mother, that grief had made them selfish. And she apologized, truly, deeply. No manipulation, No excuses. Just words. And I didn't respond. Not because I was bitter, but because closure didn't require conversation anymore. I had already buried that part of my past. But I did pray for her. Not out of pity or obligation, but because I had found peace, and I wanted her to feel it too. I wanted them all to stop carrying the weight of resentment because I had already dropped mine. In the years that followed, I grew in ways I never imagined. I started writing just little essays and reflections about healing, about reclaiming your voice, about the fire that forges strong women. And, to my surprise, people read them. Thousands of them. Turns out, my voice, so small, so silenced in that family, was something powerful in the world. I even bought a second property, a little cottage by the water. I never thought I'd be that woman. But here I was. People often ask if I ever regret walking away from my family. And my answer is always this. I didn't walk away from them. I walked towards myself. They made me feel like a stranger in my own skin, in my own memories, in my own mother's home. But in trying to erase me, they handed me a gift. They forced me to remember who I really was. And I will never forget again. So no, I don't carry hate. I carry wisdom.
And peace.
And sometimes, on warm, quiet evenings, I still walk through that old house, now filled with my colors, my voice, and my memories, and I whisper into the air, "I'm home, Mama." And I finally feel welcome.